Hello, college football fans, and welcome to College Football Throwdown, episode 40. I am your host, Alex Schmitz, and joining me today is Peter Schmitz.
Hello, fans. How are you?
Yep. Your favorite father-son duo college football podcast is back.
That's right. And the 40th episode, that's pretty impressive. I didn't realize that, I guess. I should have, but I didn't.
Yeah, no, we've done a good number of these. You know, some good ones, some not so good ones. You know, we're going to try to keep on our monthly schedule, I think, here in the off-season. That's our current plan.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. But there's been a good bit since we last talked. We talked in like mid-January, mostly talking about the national championship game. And so we've had recruiting day has come and gone since we were last at our podcast. So I think it'd be best to start off with that, don't you think?
Absolutely. The interesting thing about, signing day every year is that there's always a few surprises. Although I think there were probably fewer of those this year than there have been in some more recent years, and I'm speaking nationally, not necessarily for Nebraska, but nationally. There were an awful lot of players who had already identified where they were going, but as has become almost a tradition, the rich have gotten much richer, and the crazy amount of talent that is gathered up by the Alabama and Ohio State, now on an annual basis is almost frightening.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me when I was looking at those rankings was that I believe it was Maryland was above us, like in the mid to high teens. That kind of surprised me.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think you can attribute that to. One is that they had we only signed 20 players. They signed 28 players. So they had a few more eligible scholarships that were eligible to be used in this particular recruiting cycle, and they had some from the previous year. Part of that happens whenever you have a transition of coaches, and in the case of Maryland, they have a new coach who had brought some new energy and enthusiasm to the program. He you may recall was an assistant at University of Michigan, and now as a head coach for the first time, and is a pretty dynamic guy. And then additionally, Maryland has, and the vicinity of Maryland, Virginia, that area, has some incredible talent. Year in and year out, some of the top players in the country are from that area, way more talent rich than most. So the fact is that Maryland was probably doing a better job of keeping their guys, at home than they have in the past. And you got to give credit to, his name is Ash, the new coach there. He did a good job, a very good job.
Yeah, interesting. I was reading up because I wasn't, following like the recruiting day for the Nebraska side super closely, as I'm sure you were. But just reading up on it now after the fact, sounds like it was an interesting day. We went hard on California, and we got, I think. The stat was that we had like 8 that we were looking at out there, and we ended up getting 4. So some misses, some hits.
Exactly. That's the deal. Is that we were in on a lot of very talented players. Many of them in the same positions. Many of them either defensive backs or wide receivers. And we had hoped to really stock up on wide receivers because we had a lot of wide receivers leaving this year, graduating. But we ended up with a pretty darn good group that I think the coaches and the fans are going to be happy with, but we probably fell short as far as numbers, and we ended up only signing 20 players. We could have signed 2 or 3 more, at least 2 or 3 more, maybe even a couple more than that, if we were willing to do a little bit more of the oversigning, which is a subject we will definitely have to bring up on a future podcast. Is this the whole issue of how you manage your roster and what methods can be used to keep your roster at or very near the 85 scholarship limit going into a football season, and how we are choosing to hinder ourselves, to really handicap ourselves because of the choices we're making at times like this past February signing day.
Right. Well, we've definitely talked about the oversigning before, especially
We
with the
have.
way Alabama does that, and then kind of
Yeah.
what do you want to say, weeds out the weak, so to speak,
Right.
after the
Right.
fact. But couldn't you argue that Riley is kind of saving his scholarships? So like he's like, well, I could get two or three more now, but I'd rather, there aren't any guys out there that we could get with those that I like really, really
Really,
want.
really
So,
wanted.
so I'm going to
Right.
save them and hope that I can get those guys next year.
You're exactly right, Alex. That's exactly what he's doing, and it's going to be a small recruiting class for us again next year because of how the number of seniors we have going into this season is a relatively small number. So that's why leaving a few of those unused is not a terrible idea. It's actually going to help balance out the quantity in the classes a little bit more. So I'm thinking that's why he wasn't all heck bent on filling it up, So you are exactly right. Now the challenge though with that is you have attrition every year. There's always attrition,
Mm-hmm.
and now with the way that rosters are managed a little differently than it used to be, and people are escorted out the door a little bit more aggressively, then we as a football team need to raise our hands and choose to start doing that, or we're going to fall behind in the so-called arms race of talent accumulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we did okay. I mean, we ended up with seven 4-star players, which is a pretty good quantity out of 20 players, and I think a lot of the even supposedly lesser talented players are pretty darn good players. Guys that probably are a little underranked simply because of the position they play, or maybe they were from an area that doesn't quite get the recognition that some of the larger metropolitan areas might get in terms of visibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking at some of like our top tier guys, and
Right,
looked like we got a pretty prominent quarterback recruit, a really good running back, maybe a defensive tackle, I
right.
believe, as well, that was highly regarded.
Yep, we did, and we got a couple of top wide receivers, a really good linebacker, and then a good defensive back, but probably with three wide receivers who are all 4-star type talents. One of them, Tyjon Lindsey, who is regarded as a top 100 player in the country.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking at a little map of where they all came from, and I believe one was from Michigan, right?
That is correct. One player that we got is from Michigan, and his name is Andrew Ward. He's a linebacker out of Muskegon, which is
Ah,
not far from us here in Traverse City.
no, it isn't. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, when I was looking at like where we were placing on these recruiting rankings, that they have on these websites, we were usually anywhere from the high teens to high teens to the low 20s. So we averaged out at like that 21, 23 ish, I believe.
Right, that is correct, and that's just slightly better than what we've been doing over recent years. And I'm of the opinion that we're really not accumulating talent at the level that it is required if you want to win championships, and I mean like Big Ten championships. If for us to really get into the mix of winning Big Ten championships, we need to be in the top 15. If we start consistently getting into the top 15 and only occasionally dropping into the top 20, 25, then that would be in my the kind of performance we need. We're never going to be consistently top 5, top 10, but if we could be top 15 with some regularity and only occasionally dropping back, then that's the kind of talent that would get us where I think we want to be.
And
But relative to the Big Ten, there were three teams that did really, really well. Ohio State, Michigan being way off the charts, top 5, pretty much consensus, and then Penn State was either right near the top 10 or in the top 10 on most rankings. And then, as you pointed out, the Maryland team's recruiting haul was really outstanding and was due to a combination of things, but but they did an outstanding job, and they were there. And then it was generally us, which is great because that means we were the best recruiting class within the Big Ten West,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so at least relative to those that we're going to be competing with most consistently, for our side of the conference, it's going to be a good thing.
Yep. No, I did see that, and so that is promising that Wisconsin didn't pull away from us with some crazy good recruiting year or something like that.
Right, right, exactly. But we have historically out recruited Wisconsin only to get our butts kicked by them. So that just tells you a little bit about what continuity in coaching and coaching philosophy will do. And Barry Alvarez has done a good job, even though he's had some coaching turnover and had to replace head coaches. There has been a philosophy in place there, and it has remained. Because it originated with him, and it was kind of handed down. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's impressive, really.
Yeah. All right. And transitioning, this kind of ties in with the recruiting thing, but I've seen some interviews and articles about Mike Riley where he's kind of talked about how he doesn't necessarily love the nice guy label that he gets from so many of his peers and from the media and stuff like that, and that he's a super competitive guy just like every other head coach. And it seems like this year, maybe because he's feeling a bit of the pressure and that he's in his third year here at Nebraska, that he's firing some of these coaches that have been with him for a long time and trying to achieve that level of championship excellence.
Right. Well, that's the thing, as I think that he has been very willing to evaluate his coaches, and if he didn't think that they were doing a good enough job in all aspects, recruiting as well as coaching as well as teaching, the actual on the field teaching of the players. And so if that wasn't satisfactory, he's been willing to let some guys go that he had been with for a long time. And I think that is something that, of course, Nebraska fans are pleased with because that's what they expect. If there is a coach that isn't performing, we don't have the time to wait around for them to get around to it, to get adjusted or get comfortable. These are all coaches that are experienced. He's got a very experienced staff. But what he did in the offseason by firing two of his longtime friends and associates was a little uncharacteristic of his history, but exactly what needed to happen if we were going to take steps to move in the right direction. Now, will these new coaches be better? Only time will tell. But what we had was unsatisfactory in his mind. And so he felt he needed to make a change in direction, and that's something that people were critical that he was a little too loyal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very clear demonstration that he's taken steps to do everything he can to put us in a position to be, competing for championships.
Yep. No, I like seeing that for sure from him. Because on the one hand, I mean, it's great that he's, that has this reputation, this nice guy, he's not like a cutthroat coach, like we see with some of the others in this, in the industry, so to speak.
Right.
But at the same time, obviously, we, at the end of the day, the performance on the field is what really counts. And I definitely think he was, dissatisfied with his team's performance in the second half of the season last year, and he seems committed to changing up the defense. We're definitely going to be changing up the offense now that we'll have a new quarterback in the position. So I think this is going to be a very interesting year to watch how he handles this important third year.
I agree, and you know what? I mean, and there's a great deal of pressure, I believe, on the new defensive coordinator because of that. Because we can't afford to have a down year this next year because we have a fairly difficult schedule. We have a lot of the tougher games at home, but we have a difficult schedule and almost some games that you would look at and say that's likely a loss, that type of thing. But at the same time, we have an opportunity for the first time in literally 8 years to have a quarterback that fits the system that we're trying to run, and doesn't have a fatal flaw, so to speak, at least as far as we know, right? So the bottom line is there seems to be a better fit between what we're trying to accomplish offensively and the skill sets of the kinds of kids we've recruited here in recent years. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how quickly that can all be brought together, combined with a new defensive scheme that's obviously going to put these kids back into learning mode a great deal more than they would have if they had stayed with the existing defensive coordinator. So it's a big risk, but he needed to do something to get us going in the right direction defensively. And I think he's confident we got the right group together coaching wise to get it done offensively. Now it's just a matter of executing. We got to get these guys on the same page and make it happen.
Yeah. Well, and I was also reading about our new safeties coach, a guy named Bob Elliott. Interestingly, he's an older gentleman, 63 years old, been coaching for many years, and it was apparently, I'm blanking on the university, but he was like a coach at the university when Bob Diaco, or is it Bob Diaco?
It's Notre Dame.
Was
yep,
it? Okay.
Bob Diaco. And it was at Notre Dame. They both coached with alongside each other at Notre Dame.
Well,
and he was Bob's hire, so to speak. He was a guy that was definitely on Bob's radar. Our new defensive coordinator.
Right. Well, I did read that as well, and that Bob, he's the main reason he's here at Nebraska is because of Bob. But it was also mentioning that he was a coach at the university when Bob was a player. And
right, that's correct, and that was at Iowa.
Iowa, that was it. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that was at Iowa. So they have a long history, and the new defense safeties coach is a guy that has a pretty decent history of being a good coach and teacher. He's had some medical issues that kind of put him behind the eight ball, and he needed to devote some attention to that. I think he's a cancer survivor. And so now he's healthy enough to again coach. He had been in a role of kind of a support role at Notre Dame where he was assisting the head coach with some, I think, mostly off the field issues or duties, and that would probably bought him the time he needed to get healthy and overcome. Obviously, was a challenging medical issue.
Right. All right. Yeah. So, the fact that he's, so up there in age probably isn't the best indicator from a recruiting perspective, but the fact that he clearly has this close working relationship with Bob already, or, our defensive coordinator, that will hopefully lead to some more cohesion and a faster kind of adoption of that system.
Exactly. I think he's hired primarily to be the teacher and to be able to get this system taught and in place as fast as possible. And we have some other outstanding recruiters on that defensive side of the ball that are dynamic. And so I probably the hope is that that they're going to collectively have the right match of teaching skill as well as recruiting skill to be able to get it done. Because everybody has varying degrees of strength in their ability to recruit versus their ability to teach the scheme, and then what are you like on game day? How do you do in terms of preparation and then execution of a game plan? That's the kind of the third leg, if you will, of what makes a great coach. Mm-hmm. We'll see how all this gels together for Nebraska in a very, very important and interesting year that's coming up here in 2017.
Mm-hmm. And then here's a transition into a more national topic. I was reading about Nebraska satellite camp plans for this year. I think we have something, and it was either June or July, kind of like a two-day event. Two two-day events, I believe, was how I read it.
Right.
And this is tying into what apparently the NCAA is currently considering and will probably vote on about these changes to the rules involving satellite camps, saying that they can only happen for 10 non-consecutive days and only at NCAA institutions rather than at high schools.
Correct. They basically put the clamps down on when and how you could have them. They didn't eliminate them completely. So it's kind of interesting, that the NCAA's gone all over the map on this, from total wide open to nope, they're all illegal, to back to, well, no, that's not the right thing to do, to coming up with what they believe is some compromise that gives the coaching profession some limits. Because the problem is the wide open thing, it becomes the wild west, and coaches will do whatever they think is in their best interest to maximize their advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it means that they have to work every day for 20 hours a day, they do it, right? So you almost have to save them from themselves, right? Because they're so intensely competitive that they convince themselves that if I'm not doing it, somebody else is, and therefore I must do it. And it just kind of gets crazy. So by putting these rules in place, and it gives individual institutions a little bit of flexibility to frame and organize their own plan, but then it limits them so that they can only do so many, and then they got rid of the whole high school thing, so that because it was becoming more of a recruiting tool than this, than the presented concept that this is so that kids can get an opportunity to learn from these great coaches, from these college level coaches. You want to give young people the opportunity to get that kind of training, right? That's a good thing. But you also wanted to limit it so that they didn't drive themselves into the ground. Now these coaches will have a little bit more of their summer back because they can only do this for 10 days, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's the key. And then, so Nebraska's put together what they think is a good plan that will both maximize within those 10 days and yet, do the things that they've been successful with. Because again, one of the things that Nebraska needs is it needs players to come to Lincoln. They need to see our campus. They need to see our facilities, see how tight knit it all is, and how in close proximity to each other they all are, so that they can say, "Wow, I could see myself playing here. This would be a lifestyle and a schedule that works for me." You know what I mean? That's one of our strengths as a university, and yet so often kids don't get to do that. Well, the bigger change is not about this. What do I want to say? Help me out. The satellite camps.
Right.
That is a big deal, but an even bigger deal is the fact that there's a rule change that's going to be put in place that allows kids to travel on official visits in the summer months prior to the school year starting. It used to be that you could only do this official visits after the school year started. Now they're moving that forward so that official visits can happen earlier. And I don't know. I don't have all the specifics because I don't think it's not law yet, right? It hasn't been passed. But when it is, it's going to be a big thing for Nebraska, because it'll allow us to pay for a recruit and their parents to officially visit Nebraska. Because our problem is we're not close to any athletes, right? Mm-hmm. We have very few athletes that are in close proximity. So those kids were all having to travel on their own dime to come see us, right? And many of them committing before we ever even got to the beginning of the school year when the kids could officially visit. So we didn't even get a chance at those kids. They didn't even get a chance to see our facility. Now we'll be able to, if they have a mutual interest with us, we'll be able to go and get them officially to our school in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's something I know. We've talked about that in the past in the podcast. How that would be something that would definitely be a plus for Nebraska. Right. So it's good to hear that might be going through.
Well, it may go through, yeah, and that's going to be the bigger thing for us, I believe.
All right.
So there you go.
Were there any other national stories that you want to talk about, either recruiting wise or just larger in terms of off-season stuff? Right.
Well, so there's one that I has kind of poked the bear. I officially poked. Paul Feinbaum is a national talk show host who is a strong SEC homer in general, and specifically a strong Alabama homer, frankly. But he has the the bully pulpit of a national microphone that has been given to him by ESPN, which is a whole nother conversation. But he really got under my skin recently, and I wanted to voice this on this whole issue of he spent a monologue, at the beginning of his program, just riding and railing on Jim Harbaugh for Jim's active pursuit of uh, uh, an assistant coach hire that was clearly at least partially motivated by the fact that that coach's son is also one of the top quarterback recruits in the country for this coming season. And so, obviously, if you recruit dad and you get him to work for you, the chances of you successfully recruiting his son probably go up a little bit. At least that's the logic, right? And so, Paul Feinbaum went off and talked about how that was such an abuse of the rules, and that it wasn't, he was following the rules but not the intent of the rules, and how that is just blatant cheating, and that was a horrible thing, and blah 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 blah. And he went on and on about that. Okay, and that is the pot calling the kettle black, because the SEC in general, and specifically his beloved Alabama, are the ultimate abusers of following the letters of the law and not the intent of the law, which is why we find ourselves in this awful roster management situation that we now are having to deal with, where we are moving even more aggressively and more quickly away from the tradition of the student athlete, and the fact that kids no longer can even feel confident in being able to complete their degree at the institution that they commit to when they start their football careers in college. Because now, if you don't improve enough, if you're not good enough by about the second year in a program, then in programs at Alabama, they find a way to process you out, and they use all means to do so. They abuse all the various types of programs, like red shirts, gray shirts, blue shirts, medical deferments, basically, that allow you to assign somebody as having a medical injury that makes them incapable of playing at the same level as they did before, so that you can keep them on scholarship, but the scholarship no longer counts towards the 85 athletic scholarships. Okay, and he totally bastardized that system, totally screwed that system up by abusing the heck out of it. There used to be a bridge program system where it allowed kids to come in and they could get certain monies and support in the summer before their season, their freshman year started. So you could bring kids in, and Nebraska was it was a cornerstone of what we did because of the long-standing tradition of our walk-on program. Well, Alabama started doing that, and they would just bring in all kinds of kids, and then they would evaluate them over the summer, and then they would cut them before the season started, except for the ones that they thought might help them. So because they were doing this to all these kids, and these kids were going with the idea, and they were already starting their educations, they were going to classes at the university. So now their clock has officially started, but then they were shoved to the sidelines and said thanks but no thanks at the end of the summer. And so there are just all of these things. Following the letters of the law, the rules were in place. He wasn't breaking an NCAA rule, but he was totally abusing its purpose and intent. And he does that every damn time he can, any way he can. And as a result, many of the other SEC coaching staffs had to follow suit. It was either compete, stay up with him, or be left behind. And so that is now permeating college football, not just the SEC, although there's still some advantages because of every conference has its own rules. So it just drove me nuts that Paul Feinbaum would have the gall to call out Jim Harbaugh, even though he's right. Jim Harbaugh was skirting the edge of a rule to try to maximize his chance at a great scholarship athlete, right? He was doing that. That's not new, though, Alex. People have been doing that for years and years and years, where they hire staff with the hope that their talented child might join the team. That isn't, and frankly, that's a huge commitment on the part of a university to do that. Obviously, because you're giving this guy a job, right?
Right.
You're paying him a lot of money. So, so that's not a new thing. But this other stuff is way newer than that. I mean, you can go back 40, 50 years, and coaches were hiring the dads of great recruits. That's been going on for decades upon decades upon decades. This whole roster management thing that has been invented by Nick Saban and mastered by Nick Saban, wasn't invented necessarily by him, but certainly he was the one who mastered it. Has only been going on for the last, say, 15, maybe 20 years. So since about the turn of the century.
Right. Well, that's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about it. Is that if this guy is really like that unqualified, to be like a coach at the University of
Right.
Michigan,
Right.
it would seem like a big commitment on the part of the university to give up, one of your assistant coaching positions and spend
Right.
hundreds of thousands of dollars on this guy's
And that's
salary.
not the
Just
case. This is a guy who was a defensive coordinator in the NFL. This is a guy in his past. He
right.
was he in his most recent past. He's been a high school coach. I think so. He had the opportunity to coach his son, but he's been an NFL assistant and NFL coordinator. Okay, this guy is a talented coach, obviously. And here's the irony of it: he ended up not ending up at Michigan. This guy ended up uh, uh, about facing and ended up at the University of Oregon, and he's on the University of Oregon staff instead.
Now,
So he ended up not even being at Michigan. So after browbeating Jim Harbaugh and Michigan for a whole day's show, ironically the guy in question ended up taking a job with Oregon instead.
well, I was going to ask, do you think that was there the public outcry, quote unquote, due to Feinbaum's thing had anything to do with it, or was it probably just money?
I'm gonna tell you I don't know. No, I actually think because the guy's from the West Coast, I think the fact that he had a job opportunity at a West Coast school rather than Michigan was probably more appealing to him. Certainly, I think that there might have been money involved, i.e., the Nike money at Oregon may have played a factor in this and their facilities. And then, frankly, third and probably maybe the most important even was his son is a dual threat quarterback, far more likely to be appealing to Oregon's offense than to what Michigan's offense looks like, right? So I think all of those things probably lend themselves. Now, the young man, the boy, his son, has not yet made a commitment to either Oregon or Michigan, yet. So we'll see. That'll have to play out. Ironically, his sister, this coach's daughter, actually is an athlete at Nebraska on the track team. So even Nebraska has a chance at this kid.
Everybody's got a little piece of him, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So anyway, but it's just one of those things where it just irks me that the four-letter network again has another member of their team who is out there totally with blinders on relative to the SEC and specifically Alabama and the horrible direction that they have taken the college athlete system, and they ignore that, but then they ride roughshod on something as unique as this one coaching situation, which is something that's been going on for 60 years, 50, 60 years.
Right. Well, not that because it's been going on for 50 or 60 years it makes it right or anything like that.
No, right. But it's just been it's certainly more common, and of course you have a right to hire anybody you want, and if you think you're doing that, and one of the reasons is it increases your opportunity to get their son to play for you, there's nothing wrong with that, because you're also risking some things with that too. Obviously, you're paying this guy a salary. If he's not the best fit and the best guy for the job that you had available, then you're hurting yourself, all in exchange for one athlete. Usually that's not a good decision.
Right. It's a risky move.
Mm-hmm.
to go for that. All right. Well, very good. I think that's a good way to close out this episode. A good old
Yeah.
rant from Dad over there.
Yes. Well, absolutely. We need to do that more often. I've got to make a segment out of that somehow.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we can make it on SEC rants alone.
Yes. Exactly.
There we go.
Exactly. Well, and that'd actually be something as a teaser for the next episode. Is we'll know a lot more about Old Miss recruiting and the implications of that, the whole NCAA sanctions that are coming to them because of their recruiting violations. And ironically, they're snubbing their nose at the NCAA probably cost them because now they have more accusations that they're dealing with, and the exposure of the abuse of basically players being paid has broadened, and I think it's going to broaden beyond Ole Miss to some other SEC schools because there's a reason why SEC or why Ole Miss was doing it, and it's because it's rampant in that league,
Yeah.
and it's going to show up.
I recall you sent a Facebook message, I believe, to myself, or it was an email to myself and your brother, my uncle, a couple other
Yeah,
people, and it was these pictures from these SEC players, like
right,
Twitters and Instagrams and stuff. It was them with all these nice cars.
right, exactly, exactly. Crazy.
Yeah,
So
crazy.
we'll have to revisit that subject for sure.
Yep. Well, like you say, that's a good teaser for next time.
There you go. Absolutely.
All right. Well, if you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at footballthrowdown at podomatic.com, footballthrowdown.podomatic.com, I should say. You can also email us at huskerpete13 at gmail.com. You can leave us a comment on the Podomatic website, or you can leave a comment on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are available up there. We always like hearing from our fans. So thank you out there for listening to this special 40th episode podcast. We'll have to
There
do
you
something
go.
special for 50 when we get there.
That's right. Absolutely.
We can look forward to that. So until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.